Hey, good morning, everyone. We will get started. Right. For those of you who have not met or not had a chance to talk to you yet again, my name is Chad Hibbs. I am the lead for strategic and community planning for the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services within the Bureau of Quality Planning and Research. I did see Margaret Osborne on, also from the department. Margaret, do you want to say hi?
Morning, everyone. I am a regional coordinator for the department and can assist with the CAP, any questions you have, and working with Craig on that as well.
Good morning. Okay, so we will go ahead and get started. Welcome to the latest version of our office hours. We'll continue the format as we've started. I'll provide some general updates, open up for any questions that you may have. We do have some topic-specific information again this morning that I will share. And then we'll open it up again for questions. I anticipate using maybe about 20-25 minutes in the last half hour or so. We'll open it up for questions that any of you have on any of the topics related to the CAP. And I will leave this line open until noon. So for those of you who don't feel comfortable asking questions in front of the entire group, you can hang on after and we'll get your questions answered before you leave. So some general updates for this morning. Just a reminder that the Crisis Services Resources Survey, the legislative requirements section for the CAP, the survey is to be completed by October 7th. If you have questions at any time, and again, we'll open it up this morning for questions, but feel free to contact me if I don't have the answer right away. Hopefully get it to you within a few minutes and get back to you. But just a reminder that that survey is to be completed by October 7th. That link to complete the survey was sent out to the executive directors a few weeks ago. If your executive director has not seen it or has not mentioned that it's available, please contact me and we'll make sure that that gets to the person who needs to get to. If we need to resend the link to the survey, we'll do that as well. The training cohort for those newer executive directors or newer board staff that do not have as much experience with community planning. We had our first meeting last week. It went really well. Provided just a general overview of the CAP in its entirety. And future meetings will be breaking it down into specific sections and specific topic areas and really take a longer in-depth look at the community planning process and that support that's needed for those boards that are participating. The second meeting is scheduled for September 29th at 10 o'clock. We're having these a couple of times a month. So we have them scheduled at least through mid-November, and then we'll kind of revisit towards the end of that process to see if we want to keep it bi-monthly or monthly. But we do have them scheduled twice a month through mid-November, I think just right before Thanksgiving, actually. So we'll continue on with those. Office hours, these meetings for October. There was a sentiment from the group last week's call that we move them to bi-weekly, twice a month. There'll be two separate dates, October 6th and October 19th. October 6th is a Thursday. We're hoping to have Jamie Carmichael from the Ohio Department of Health talk about health improvement zones. So we're hoping to have a presentation from her on October 6th to talk about that process, dashboards, what that means for equity and disparities and social determinants of health. So that'll be Thursday. She's not available at this time on Wednesdays. She has a standing meeting. But we did find some time to schedule on her calendar for October 6th. So that's 11 o'clock, and then we'll revert back to our Wednesday calls on October 19th. So I will send these dates out to the group probably before, or maybe at least this time next week. So you have them on your schedule, but at least you can have some calendar holds. I do need to confirm the August 6th with ODH. That's why I haven't sent them out yet, but it seems to be that that's a good date and time to get that information. So once I have that confirmed, I will send out the calendar invite so you can put them formally on your calendar, but you can hold these in the meantime. So that's all I have for general updates. I want to spend some time going over the assessment this morning and answering some specific questions that we have received over the last week or so to get some clarification on some of the aspects of the assessment and what exactly that we're looking for. So before I go to that, any questions on anything that you've seen so far, or any questions on the crisis survey that's due on October 7th? Feel free to unmute yourselves, turn your camera on, or
Yeah, Chad, I have a question about the survey. This is
Yes,
John from Trumbull County.
hi, John.
I should know the answer to this question, but I don't. The legislative requirements section is, what, like 11 pages long? And is that the survey? The survey is not some subset of that or some additional set, but it's those 11 pages and everything that's asked for.
Yes, it'll be those questions specifically.
Okay. So then we not only indicate, for example, in that one section, what we fund, but how much funding for each item.
Correct.
So if there's a dollar amount, obviously we're funding it, so we don't need to say, yes, we fund it, or put an X in the box, just the dollar amount.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay.
Hi, this is Holly Zweizig from Union County. Just a quick question on page number 3 on question number 3, when we're filling out the table for crisis services, it asks specifically for the number of people who have been served in the board area. And so for those of us who are board areas, if we have contract services for folks that are outside of our catchment area, for instance, psychiatric hospitalizations, do we put that in information in section 9 table instead?
Let me bring it up so I can show.
So it looks like number 3 is for just the area within your county border, or borders for those that have joint county boards. For number 9, it's asking for the funding of the board for services in and outside.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Any other questions? Okay. And we'll move on to then the assessment. So this is just a brief recap of everything that's included in the assessment process, and I'll take you to the template here in just a few minutes to answer some specific questions that we received over the last week or so. So the assessment includes the identification of mental health and addiction needs and challenges, where you're able to identify major, moderate, and minimal challenges based on the factors that we provided to you, and identify any groups experiencing disparities in the area of needs and challenges. Then we also ask you to do the same thing for mental health, addiction, and service gaps. Again, identifying major, moderate, and minimal challenges for a variety of factors that we included there. And again, identifying groups experiencing disparities. We also ask you to identify social determinants of health that could be driving behavioral health challenges. And amongst that group, do you know if any of those are drivers for behavioral health challenges in your board area? And then we have some optional narratives to provide us some more information on disparities, disparity populations, or what else you're seeing in the realm of disparities, the social determinants of health. We give you a narrative option there. And then the final two sections of the assessment, identification of strengths of the boards. We provide you with some potential opportunities, or at least some potential examples of what strengths could be, and you have the opportunities to identify others. And then also level of collaboration, both within some proposed community partners that you may or may not have within your board area, and then also your relationship with providers in your board area. So that's just a brief recap of what's in the assessment. I want to take you through some of the questions that we received itself, and I'll bring up the template so we can walk you through it. So here's just an overview of the assessment, some links for information that could be pertinent to you, to your board in completing the assessment. And the first section is the identification of mental health and addiction needs. So we want to know what the prevalence is. So we provide you with some statistics on the county profile tool that we provided to you. What we want to make sure is, and what we kind of want to reiterate, is that this really shouldn't be the only data that you're looking at as far as needs and prevalence within your board area. So what we have standardized as part of this assessment process are the areas of the assessment that we hope that we could kind of be able to really cultivate some data and some analysis across all 50 boards. And we also built in some flexibility that even though we provided you with some assessment data and pointed you into other areas in which other data can be found, that isn't to really preempt anything else that you do regularly or annually as far as your assessment processes. So what you do, if you do the recovery-oriented system of care assessment, please continue to do that. What you do as far as collecting survey data from your providers or survey data from your constituents, your clientele, family members of those that are being served, your stakeholder groups within your community, your health districts, your family, children, first councils. We don't want to have what we provided to you as part of the tools for assessment zero out or negate anything you've done as far as primary data collection. We still want that to continue. What we did on behalf of some recommendations was to cultivate some publicly available data that we felt would be pertinent that you could use as far as your assessment, and provide that data to you that we'd be able to get our hands on and cultivate that we felt was accurate at both the state and local level. And we also combined that with some national data that we had access to and were able to kind of break down regionally and also county based. So that wasn't meant to be the end all be all of your assessment. What we had hoped is that will be a complement to. So anything you did previous to this version of the community assessment plan, we want you to continue to do. But we just tried to standardize the process a little bit to help us in data collection and analysis that we will then provide back to you as we receive your data and your plans at the end of January. So the first section is the identification of mental health and addiction needs and what those challenges could be. So we provided you with some areas that could be challenges as far as needs for behavioral health. One of the questions that we received just this week was, if I don't know, if our board doesn't know whether we have a specific factor is a challenge or not for our area, what do we do? And my advice, my recommendation was to just identify it as a minimal challenge. If it's not readily apparent in the data that you're collecting, if that factor hasn't been brought up and flashing red lights because of other data that you're collecting or what you're hearing from your constituents or your providers or those that are being served, then you can identify that as a minimal challenge. We're assuming that the major and moderate challenges are something that you're seeing in the data that you're collecting or the data you're analyzing based on your primary data collection sources, whatever that may be. So we didn't provide another or not a factor, not a challenge. But if you're unsure of the data that you have available to you that points to any of these as a red flag or at least a cautionary indicator, then you can just identify that as minimal in all of these areas. So whether that be children, youth, and families, and adults with challenges, and then the disparities population. So in the data that you're seeing, or the data that we provided to you, is it pointing to any special population that are experiencing disparities with behavioral health challenges? So another question we received this week is, where do we get data to look at these disparities? And we're not asking you to go through this list and see if you can find data to support whether these are populations that are experiencing disparities or not. We're hoping that these disparities and these populations will be evident based on the data that you're collecting. So what are you seeing in the data or the census data or whatever it is that you're looking at, your survey data? What are you seeing that may point to specific disparities, whether that be through factors, whether it be through educational attainment, disabilities, geography, race, culture, veterans, men, women, immigrants, LGBTQ+. What are you seeing in your data, or what are you not seeing in your data that would identify any of these populations as potentially experiencing disparities? And we've provided others here for you to be able to say, okay, this is what we're seeing for this, and it may be a subset of one of these, or it may be a combination of a couple of these. So what we're hoping is the data that you're seeing will lead you to look at disparities in something other than race or something other than income that could be a factor in any population that are experiencing challenges with behavioral health. So we also have this as far as providing some additional narrative. There'll be space within the survey itself that you can identify that, and any additional assessment findings that you are seeing that points to what your priorities could be. So what are you seeing that may be an increase or a significant decrease based on your previous data collection and analysis from needs assessment, whether it's driven by the board or whether they're participating in other community assessment processes, i.e. The health population survey that the health districts do, or what your school surveys are showing. So we have the opportunity for you to provide that information as well. So the very same thing for addiction service gaps. So again, the purpose of this question is to identify access issues that need improvements and to inform the selection and priorities of your plan. So again, opportunities to identify major, moderate, and minimal challenges, overall service gaps in the continuum of care, or access for children, youth, and families and adults. So again, we're hoping that the data you're collecting, the data that we provided to you in combination, helps you identify what some major, moderate, and minimal challenges could be, and you can prioritize your top 3. And again, if it's not any of these, we have plenty of opportunities to identify others that you're seeing in the data specifically. So we have access gaps in the continuum of care, access for children, youth, and families, and also access for adults. And again, the opportunity to identify populations that may be experiencing access issues, regardless of the reason, and what could point to the development of your priorities in your plan, identify strategies that could affect specific special populations or indicators that you're going to choose in that planning process and development of your formal plan. And again, the opportunities to identify any narrative around your disparities and the opportunity to define any additional assessments to access challenges that we may not have identified in this table. Again, this isn't exhaustive. These are common areas that we feel that there could be challenges in, and we tried to cultivate other areas such as the State Health Improvement Plan, and other areas that we identified up at the very beginning, in the overview, where other challenges or other needs or gaps could be identified based on access. So we also have a similar conversation about the social determinants of health. Another question that we had received, and I think we had it included in the first FAQ, and we'll have that updated monthly. So look for that at the beginning of October. That we included some of these within the county profiles that we identified and provided to you, but not all of them, because there's some data that isn't data that we can accurately extrapolate across the entire state. Some of these are very local, and some are very kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Integral to your local systems that we may not have access to, such as your affordable housing. What does that look like in your community? And not just recovery housing, but housing in general. Housing cost burden, residential segregation, no vehicle, looking at food insecurity. So this is data that it could be available statewide, but not actually data that we have access to that we can drill down in your community, that we're hoping through your primary data collection that you can identify some of these social determinants of health that we did not provide to you in the county profiles. So looking at your food banks, looking at your providers who are looking at recovery housing or the establishment of housing in the broader sense in your community that you may have partnerships with. So what else are you seeing in your communities that can then lead to the identification of how these social determinants could be factoring in the challenges of your behavioral health system that you're seeing in your communities? And again, we identified some potential impacts, potential drivers, and we asked you to identify whether these could be major, moderate, or not a driver, or unknown. We did provide an unknown for these because some of these may be different based on board area, based on county, based on zip code. So we do know that some of these are not able to be extrapolated across. So there was an opportunity here to identify not a driver or unknown. And again, select your top three. So it's broken down into social and economic environment, and also in physical environment and health behaviors. And also the opportunity again to identify any populations that are experiencing disparities that may be driving issues, behavioral health issues in your community akin to the social determinants of health. And again, the optional disparities narrative and the additional assessment findings. There'll be a box for you in the survey to complete that. And then we've also identified some other areas in which you can find some assessment data. We have the link to the health improvement zones. I haven't had an in-depth conversation with ODH on their health improvement zones, but I do know they have some dashboards that are coming. So once we have the access to those, we will send that link and we'll update this on our website. This is on the Community Planning website that we sent to you last week. It's also included in the FAQ documents. So once we have access to those, we will send them to that. And then a couple of sections of the assessments, strengths, including your community assets and partnerships. We provided some potential examples on ways to identify community strengths, and there's some others there. Please feel free to add to those that you may have that we haven't potentially outlined here. The other significant new section is the identification of the strength of your board's collaboration with community partners. We developed a scale for you to use and identified some potential community partners that you may be interacting with as a board. And we're asking you to utilize this scale to identify what your level of collaboration is across these potential partners. And knowing that some of these collaborations or level of collaborations may change from topic area to topic area, we just ask you to identify your highest level of collaboration. You may have multiple projects going on with the same provider, and you may be more heavily involved with those than others. We just ask you to identify the highest level of collaboration you have across any of these. And this is, again, not an exhaustive list, and some of these may not be available in your board area, and we have the opportunity for you to identify that. So I know that not every board area has UMADOPT, and not every board area has educational service centers. So we have the opportunity for you to describe whether this entity does not exist. So we have the scale from no interaction at all the way to collaboration, and we provided a scale for you to identify as such. And then also the opportunity to indicate the relationship the board has with your community behavioral health providers. 6A asks you to identify the potential universe via a number of providers across the continuum of care that the board is aware of in its area. And then B asks you of that entire universe of providers of behavioral health services in your board area, how many of those in the continuum of care do you actually contract with or have an MOU with based on your level of collaboration? So we didn't say specifically contract because we hope that for many of your partners that you have, there is a certain level of, at least a certain level of collaboration with your community providers. But this isn't necessarily tied to those with contracts, but do you have formal MOUs or other formal agreements with those providers across the continuum? So A is identifying the potential universe of providers based on your knowledge at the time that you're completing this. And of that universe, how many of those do you have an MO or MOU or other formal agreement? And then the opportunity to also link to other community assessments that you participated in, whether that be your ROSC, your local health department, or community hospital needs assessment process. If there's some online information posted, please feel free to drop that into this that we can look at, or at least say that this is the work that we're doing on behalf of the board area as far as our needs assessment process. Not required, just the opportunity to identify that if you so choose. So I just wanted to take a few minutes this morning to kind of walk through this again and make you aware of some of the questions that we were receiving, and we'll be updating these in the FAQs that we'll be releasing here in a couple of weeks at the beginning of October. But we'll answer questions at any time. So any questions on the assessments before I open up to any additional questions on anything related to the CAP?
Yeah, Chad, it's John from Trumbull again.
Yes, sir.
Just on 6A, the matter of providers.
Mhm.
So the department certifies behavioral health providers in every county, and in our county we have a relationship with some, but not with others. Mm-hmm. But the 6A would include everybody that is providing behavioral health, whether we have a connection to them or not. Sure. And would it also include non-behavioral health providers that we have a relationship with, like homeless shelters or domestic violence programs? They may not be certified as behavioral health, but they're partners. I'm just, you can tell I'm a little confused.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I would kind of limit that to those that are providing behavioral health services that you are aware of.
So if we contract with a homeless shelter and have workers doing outreach and case management, we would not include them in the provider list. Is that?
Yes.
Okay. And on the other hand, if there are certified agencies that we don't have a relationship with, we would include them.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to clarify the universe there. And yes, B is easy.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, we've had similar questions on 6A, and it is that the providers, whether they are credentialed or not, that are providing behavioral services in your board area that you are aware of, and knowing that, and there may be, again, those that you aren't aware of.
Yeah.
But just at this time that you're completing this survey, it's just asking for a general number across the continuum that at least you know of that are providing
Yeah.
behavioral health services.
Yeah. And it may or may not be complete. We learn about providers getting certified. We've never heard of them, but they're
Yep.
certified and in the community.
Yeah, we understand this will be really a point in time snapshot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great. Thanks.
we're 100% aware of that, I guess.
Chad, are you also looking in that section for private providers that we may be aware of that are not certified through OMOS?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any additional questions about the assessment? So one of the things that I keep talking about is the survey for the CAP. So we really had hoped to release the survey very soon after we released the templates to you. But with the movement of the timeline to get the crisis services data in so we can get that collected and analyzed and back to both leadership here and then the administration, also the General Assembly, that is requiring us to report on these indicators. That we did not want to put two surveys out at the same time, just to avoid confusion. So once we get past the October 7th deadline and we close that survey, then we will actually send out the link to the CAP itself that will be due on January 31st. So I keep saying and referencing a survey that will be coming out. We will, but we just didn't want to send it out now, just for hopefully to reduce any confusion that there may be for multiple surveys out there at the same time. So once we get past October 7th, we close this survey and start the data collection analysis process. Then we will provide you with the survey to complete the CAP. And then we also have a guidance document that we will be releasing at the same time. That will be a direct crosswalk between the templates and the survey. So this section of the CAP, this section of the assessments, this correlates to the specific number in the survey that you're going to be entering in that information. So once we get this done, the crisis stuff, we'll move on to the survey for the CAP, let you guys have access to it, give you the guidance document that does a direct crosswalk, and then we can really spend some time. Our plan is in in December and January, spending time to kind of walk through that survey, at least in December, to answer any questions that you may have on the survey itself. It's going to be built, it is built similarly to the crisis survey, but it looks a little bit different based upon the information that we're asking you to submit on behalf of your CAP, your formal CAP. So I keep referencing that's something that you will see here, hopefully before the end of October. Any other questions? All right. If not, our next meeting, our last weekly meeting, will be next Wednesday, the 28th. Before we move to at least bi-monthly meetings in October and November, and then we'll after that we'll figure out the schedule of December and November needs to look like, or excuse me, December and January needs to look like for these as well. We'll take our cues from this group as we continue to move forward. So if you don't have any other questions, I will see you next week. Hope everyone has a great day and a great rest of your week. For those who have questions that they don't want to ask right now in front of the group, I will keep this line open until noon, and I will be here to answer any questions that you have. All right, everyone, have a great day.